Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Angel of Words podcast, where your stories are heard. I am your host, Angel of Words. Before we get started, don't forget to click on that notification bell on YouTube, subscribe, share these messages is important. You could also follow me on all podcast platforms, and also check out the website at www.aowent.com. And if you want to leave a donation to the Angel of Words podcast, it is Cash App AOWNYC. Now on deck on the Angel of Words podcast, we have the CEO and co-founder of Mastery Portfolio, Mrs. Constance Borro. Miss Borro, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's a pleasure to have you.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Miss Borro, you have created, I love it because it's been a great season of unicorns and people creating applications, with minimal resources and things of that nature. And you have created one of, I would say, the best application that I've seen online or in the App Store to help grade and educate our children. It's Mastery Portfolio. How and why? Well, I kind of know why you created this app, right? But could you tell us about the problem that you had with education and the reason why you wanted to create Mastery Portfolio? And then after that, tell us what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me, Angel. I'm really excited to speak to you, especially considering my roots as a native New Yorker, born in Manhattan, raised in the Bronx, before we moved out to Westchester, and then eventually out to Columbus, Ohio, which is actually where I live now. And so having gotten my teaching roots also in the South Bronx and Brooklyn and at a number of schools, the kind of uniform theme that I experienced was that kids were really demotivated by grades and really kind of deflated a lot of times by the way that we do traditional grading. And so this concept called standards-based grading or mastery-based grading takes away those kind of points and averages and that kind of ranking and sorting of students into A's and B's and C's, and just gives them descriptive feedback about what skills they're really strong at right now and what skills they need to further develop. And so that gives kids agency in their learning. They can take that information and go off and use any number of resources, Khan Academy, Google searching, and their textbook even, to go and learn those skills that they need to learn. And then their grade goes up. And so their grade is always a current reflection of everything they're learning rather than sort of a hole that they can't dig themselves out of because of kind of one poor test earlier in the semester or something like that. So when you get rid of those points and averages, it really is very empowering to students. And so I did that in my teaching practice at every school that I taught in as an educator, K all the way through high school, in a variety of subjects. And I finally landed myself at an independent school in Columbus, Ohio when we moved out here. And we had the resources to actually purchase whatever the grading software was kind of our choice. And so we got on sales calls with a bunch of different outfits, and they all said, oh, no, we can't accommodate that kind of grading. Oh, no, we can't get rid of the averages at the top. That would affect all our other users.
Wow.
And so they basically were telling me that they couldn't provide the service to keep track of the data for this really empowering kind of grading philosophy that I've been using my whole career. I've really been using Google Sheets or Excel spreadsheets to keep track of the data because there wasn't a good tool. And so we finally try to put money after the good tool that we thought had to be out there, and we couldn't find it. So we decided to kind of be the change we wanted to see in the world, as we always tell our students, right? And to go out and build it and make it available to educators. So our inaugural app is called the Mastery Book. You can sign up to be on our wait list for kind of an early free account at masteryportfolio.com. Kind of see what we're about and
I'm getting goosebumps. I'm going to be honest. I looked at that. I thought about my time in school, and I'm going to, and in addition to that, Constance, I have a huge, I have a lot of trepidation when it comes to education because, you know, I mean, personally right now I don't have any children, but I do have a niece. And I remember that when I had to take care of her for that certain amount of time, and she's 9 years old, she was learning the same way I was learning 20 years ago. Not even. I was her age, what, 20, probably 30 years ago, right? So I'm like, why is my niece at a charter school that's supposed to be this amazing thing? Because, you know, I'm not a parent yet. So all I hear is charter schools. To me, it's more of a buzzword than an actual thing that I'm living in. But I'm like, why is my niece learning at a charter school the same way I was learning 30 years ago? That's a problem for me, Constance. It really is.
I agree with you. And it's a problem for our future workforce. You know, we're an increasingly technological economy, and the demands of the jobs, you know, research shows that 80% of the jobs that our current college graduates are going to occupy in 8 years' time are job descriptions that, you know, don't even exist right now, like manager of robotic personnel or something like that. So, you know, we can't possibly prepare students for the actual roles they're going to take. We need to prepare them to be good learners, to be able to take feedback, to be able to learn quickly, to be nimble on their feet, flexible thinkers, because they're going to have to just adapt and learn how to do the jobs of the future. And so if we're not keeping track of those critical thinking, analysis, evaluation skills that they need to develop for the jobs of the future, then we're really underserving them. And our economy is going to suffer as a result because we won't have enough qualified people to take on, you know, these jobs of the future. So that's, you know, that's another kind of bigger picture problem that we solve.
Yes.
We really, you know, the software is kind of one avenue, but another part of our services that we found that we really developed because schools have asked for it is a series of professional learning experiences for teachers to really start to wrap their heads around what an innovative grading scheme can look like, what it can do to empower their students and to make their classroom teaching more efficient, frankly. You know, you don't have to teach the whole textbook if you upfront assess what the actual skills are that your students don't yet have. Some of them may already know a lot of the foundational topics that you plan to cover. So why don't you dig deeper, you know, once you kind of have the tools to assess that. So it's very exciting. There are a lot of educators out there who are behind this mission. There are a lot of partner organizations that we're in communication with who are trying to do this work as well. So I think the time for change is now. And, you know, I'm grateful that you're helping get the word out there because, you know, there is a better way and we do need to update what we're doing in education to be able to serve our students best, which is our promise to them at the end of the day.
Definitely. And what you're doing with that app, I mean, you know, and especially with the website, I appreciate it because and first of all, let me tell you that looking at that application, it instantly made me feel that you actually care about your students, which is another issue. You know, you care about your students is obviously with the way that the app is made, because the app basically breaks down if you took a test, you know, it wasn't, oh, you got an 85, you passed. It's bigger than that. It's like, yeah, you passed with an 85, but you focus on the 15 you didn't get, and the fact that, okay, you didn't comprehend this, you didn't comprehend this. Your mastery of this is good, but your comprehension of this is bad. And I appreciate that, but because it puts attention to detail, which I feel as an adult, thank God that I have that skill. But I see in a lot of adults, they don't have that skill, an attention to detail, a respect for the minor things. You know, an awareness. And I feel like that's what the app built. And I think that as a human being, that is one of the best skills to have. So thank you. And what do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head there in the sense of what the app does is it gives teachers and students the information they need to be reflective and to take action to improve their own outcomes or the outcomes of their students. So that's different than a traditional grading system because in a traditional classroom, like you and I may have experienced, what we were really trained to do was not so much reflect on what we still need to learn and take action about it, but to just kind of be compliant and follow the directions and answer the question in the same exact way the teacher showed it on the board, rather than, coming up with our own strategies and arguments and critiquing the arguments of others and things that are going to really drive those transfer skills that are going to transfer from the classroom to the workplace. Students ask me, in a geometry course, for example, why do I need to learn this? I'm never going to use it in my job. Well,
but that's not true. I want to let students know that is not true. I thought standard deviation, for example, right? Standard deviation. I thought that was irrelevant in life. I had a guy last week here who created an app based on the education that the standard deviation that he learned in high school. So when kids think that, it's bogus. There's so many, and I'm sorry to cut you off, Constance, but I hate when I hear that, because the reality is the stuff you're learning in school, you never know when it's going to be applicable in real life. And it might be applicable in real life in your most important moment.
Right. So what my response, when I hear students or teachers say that is usually, well, it kind of depends on how you're messaging the learning. Are you emphasizing the process, the attempt, being okay in kind of a, leaning into the discomfort of learning something new? Are you emphasizing revision? Are you emphasizing collaboration? If you're emphasizing those things, those definitely transfer to the workplace, and the content is sort of an avenue to practice those skills. If you're really just emphasizing, all the different ways that you can find the, interior angle of a triangle, that's probably less relevant directly, but really it's about, using the content to build the skills that are going to transfer to success in life. And so that's what, when you identify your standards and your skills that you're assessing students against, that starts to move the needle in terms of the way the education is provided to students by the teacher.
And Mastery Portfolio, I feel, really drives at the heart of that problem. And I love that on the app, on the website, you literally state the problem in the beginning of the website. Like, you log on there, there's a problem, and then you tell people how you're going to fix it. And then you can go in there and actually play with the application. Who helped you guys, or how did you build this website? And could you go over a little bit for the viewers that haven't been on the website what it actually does?
So to answer your question, my co-founder, Ben Knuckles, is a old friend of mine from my New York City Department of Ed days. He taught for 10 years in New York City as well. And he left the classroom to work full-time on developing his own ed tech apps kind of on his own, because he encountered a similar problem. His first app was an attendance app. You would be surprised how hard it is to keep attendance in a way that's compliant with district requirements, for example. And so his next app was a geometry worksheet builder. And he was just kind of tinkering with things that had been obstacles for him in his classroom that he thought, I can fix this. Let me just get my kind of programming feet on the ground and make this available to teachers on the App Store. And so when I contacted him with this idea, I essentially asked him if he wanted to be my tech co-founder. And he, by the end of the call, was so excited about the mission, he was completing my sentences. And we'd never talked about this before. And so it was just a natural fit. So he is our chief technology officer, and we do have a programming team under him. And that, he and our programmers have built the entire app as it exists today. So we're very proud of that.
Wow. Now, is this something that you need patented? Because I see there's like kind of some unique things in there. So is there like a patent pending? Is there, what's going on there in that space?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as CEO, I have to wear a lot of hats, and one of them is the kind of legal intellectual property hat, right? So for your viewers who may be interested in starting their own business or getting into tech, the way that applications work is that there's nothing really copyrightable about or kind of proprietary intellectual property about writing a program in general. because it's just kind of a combination of other algorithms and functions that other people have already written or that are available kind of open source. But if you do develop an original algorithm that doesn't exist out there yet, you can potentially patent that as intellectual property. So I think Facebook probably has some algorithms that do some of their kind of AI, data stuff. I haven't looked into it in too much detail, but you really have to kind of be inventing something new in terms of programming, not just building an app that doesn't quite fit the bill. So, but for anyone starting a new company, it is a good idea to try to get a trademark for your brand, for your name, your logo. That kind of thing is considered intellectual property. So, we've put those applications through, and those are kind of moving right along, for that. So, we have our brand and our app names conditionally trademarked, which is great. Yeah, and I'm happy to connect with any of your listeners, kind of just for one-on-one advice about starting a company. I mean, I really believe in empowering.
So you're willing to do a consultation?
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, with any other business founder, I've benefited a lot from the wisdom of other founders. So happy to pay.
So you say you were willing to. You're willing to.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They can email me and ask me questions, and I'm happy to just kind of shoot back what my experience has been. If it can be helpful.
Okay, and where are they emailing you at?
Constance@masteryportfolio.com.
Okay. Perfect. Now I want I love the application. I really, because I want mothers and parents to understand the thought and effort that you put into this, and speak on the interactiveness of the app, the fact that mothers and the educator will be able to connect with the parent via that app too. That's how interactive it is. And why is that so important to you?
Right. So we found that in a lot of traditional grading schemes, the details, let me back up a second. So think about teaching and the art of teaching. It's a very skilled craft, because you're basically getting to know the cognitive profile of 30 kids in front of you over the course of 10 months. Teachers have a lot of knowledge that really just exists kind of in their heads or maybe on their teacher clipboard. But the depth of that knowledge of each kid it would be too time consuming, frankly, for that to be able to be conveyed to every parent. So there's a huge partnership gap between teachers and parents, not because the teachers don't want to partner with the parents or vice versa, but because it's just so time consuming to really do that level of conferencing to really be on the same page. So when you're able to put a lot of that detail in either as a narrative comment or as a skill mastery level into an application that parents can then log into and see that feedback, it does that communication for you. So instead of spending an hour writing a one-page email to a parent saying exactly how the kid is doing in class, they can just print a mastery report and shoot it off to the parent and say, let me know if you have any questions. And that's often all the parent needs to know how to support their child.
What do you think about the state of education right now in America, Constance? I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I can't even imagine being an educator or a parent right now in this day and age. What do you think about it right now? Because it's one of the most hot button issues that there is.
Yeah, I think a lot about this. And I think the state of education would be better if we listened to teachers more. Teachers know. Teachers are fabulous. We have some really bright field educators out there. I also think we, would benefit from listening to students more. Students might say, why do I have to learn this? But what they're really asking for is, can you give me a chance to get my feet wet in the real world and see what I'm capable of? Like, I want to know my power. I want to know what I can contribute and what problems I can solve in this world. And so if we really listen to the thing behind the thing behind the thing, we can uncover some real truths, I think, that will drive progress in a lot of our policies and a lot of things that are stagnant or just from kind of a previous era before, we were in such a technologically advanced world. So kids have so much information at their fingertips right now. We need to make sure they're getting the right information for themselves to develop themselves. And so that's part of what we try to do at Mastery Portfolio. But, you know, if you have any educators out there listening or district administrators who are thinking like, yes, we need to update what we're doing, but I don't really know what the first steps are. I mean, that's a big thing we do is consult with schools and districts to really take your vision for how you want your school to run, the culture you want, the way you want learning to happen, and where you are now, and build that roadmap of how you get from, you know, point A to point B to really implement your vision. Because knowing what steps to take along the way and how to bring along your parents and families is really challenging. And, you know, we've done it with schools before. And so, you know, schools can benefit from the wisdom of the schools we've worked with, you know, in the past.
Constance, what do you tell the educator that's like, oh my God, I don't get paid enough for this? Because this is another issue. The compensation
They don't get paid enough.
You know, yeah. Look, I'm sorry. I'm really getting into this right now. And thank you for being so cordial and having this conversation with me, because as a person outside looking in, right? Because I don't have children. I know plenty of people with children. I see their interaction with educators. First, I feel educators don't get paid enough for the stuff they have to deal with now with parents. You know, and I understand that there were a lot of situations in the past where things, you know, were not being ran the right way. There may have been some mental abuse for children, but I still feel that a teacher needs to hold a child accountable, right, without the parents' input. I have to be honest, because when you go out into the real world, you cannot call mommy when your boss is getting after you for not being reliable or whatever the case may be. You understand where I'm coming from? This is where children are learning these lessons. This is where I learned my lesson, to be accountable to someone that's not related to you. And I feel like parents have way too much access to teachers. I don't like that. I'm going to be honest with you. You know, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think there's a lot more research now than there was 20 or 30 years ago about child development and what's kind of appropriate at different ages in terms of personal responsibility and motivation as well. I mean, students go through kind of a progression of, you know, when they're 5, they're only motivated by perhaps a piece of candy or a sticker. But by the time they're in high school, they are more motivated by the abstract idea of their own future that they really can't conceive of when they're 5. I mean, their brain just isn't there yet. So I think that's a big part of it. And I do think our teachers are becoming more and more sort of well-versed in that research as they read or as their school provides professional development. And so that's to the benefit of our students. I also think that there's kind of a very positive movement toward, you know, it's typically called restorative justice, but like the idea that when a student is experiencing behavioral challenges or kind of disciplinary action against them, they're not, for whatever reason, kind of living by, let's say, the social rules, you know, or the physical rules of the school. The approach now is to really like talk to the student and understand like why is this hard for you? How can we bring you back into the community as a contributing member and as a healthy and happy student, rather than let's just suspend you for 60 days, right? So we're moving more towards community-based healing through this process rather than sort of a penal system, which I also think is healthy. You know, there's some really scary statistics that I was taught when I was a first-year teacher, such as, you know, we predict future incarceration rates based on the reading levels of second graders. You know, the percent of kids who are below grade level in reading by second grade, like essentially the state would start building prison cells for them because that's the prediction, you know, the school to prison pipeline. So, and there's also research on that, you know, New York has been really good about kind of getting
Is that a real thing, the school to prison pipeline, and teachers think about that? You guys think about that?
I mean, that's why we teach. That's why we teach, is to give our kids every opportunity that they might not otherwise have in life. Teaching really is a service job. You're not doing it for the paycheck. You're doing it for, you know, the impact you can have on students' lives. And, you know, when you have that student who at their high school graduation comes back and tells you, hey, I'm going to NYU to study applied mathematics because of your 7th grade math class. Like that happened to me a couple of years ago at a charter school in Brooklyn. Like that makes it all worth it. Every time you have those moments with students. So I agree with you that teachers aren't paid enough, and the trickle down effect of that is we're not getting the best minds in classrooms with kids. We're, people are, especially with the economy right now, students are not only, college students are not only choosing more kind of affordable colleges because they don't want to be in a ton of debt, but they're also choosing more lucrative careers because they know that you can't just you can't support a family on a teacher's salary. I mean, that's the bottom line, especially if you have student debt and a mortgage. So if unfortunately, in a lot of areas of the country, it's becoming, if you want to teach, that's like a lifestyle choice that you can make because perhaps your spouse is a doctor or a lawyer and can pay the bills. I mean, that's not right. So we do need to fix the compensation system. And, that's not my wheelhouse, but I see a lot of educators frustrated or working 2 jobs or 3 jobs sometimes. I've always worked 2 jobs, while a teacher to make ends meet. And so I feel that pain acutely. And we have a lot of good talent in our schools, and we need to compensate our teachers accordingly.
To me, I'm going to be honest with you. To me, it's a complete travesty. To me, the teacher, if it wasn't for certain teachers that I have in my life, this podcast probably wouldn't even exist. I probably wouldn't even know how to speak English. You know what I'm saying? Like, teachers to me are the most important thing on the planet Earth. And I'm sorry, I feel like you don't get a fair shake in this new world that we're going to. First of all, we live in a technological world right now where you have to be on it. You don't have the tools. You a lot of your kids, when you really care about this profession, don't have the tools. You're not being compensated. To me, that is an absolute travesty, is a disgrace, to be honest with you. Like, you guys deserve more. You deserve more. You're telling me that teachers are having to work, to pay, work 2-3 gigs? Like, a teacher should be able to live a decent lifestyle. They're taking care of 30 children in a classroom per day. Saving you money on child care costs. Teachers need to be compensated. I'm sorry. Like, it really angers me when I hear these things that you're telling me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Constance. Like, it really does. It's mind-boggling to me because people. I mean, I feel like we're shifting gears in this society to underappreciating things of value, and I don't want that.
Well, I think it is a question of values, and it's also a question of long-term goals. So. We are in a very capitalist society, which is good in some ways. I mean, it generates GDP, it fuels the economy. We do have so many resources compared to so many other countries. However, we have to think longer term than just, next quarter or our year-end statement. We need to think about how we're investing in our greatest resource, which is our human capacity. It's our children. I mean, what are we doing to develop the children who are going to be, like I said earlier, in the workforce of the future? There's a lot of momentum now around the world, in terms of the tech space, which America used to lead, but China is right there with us now. A lot of companies are hiring internationally because other countries do a better job educating their children. And so where does that leave Americans in terms of the workplace? So we do need to think about these things, and I do think teacher compensation is part of that. There are some good organizations that attempt to help with the teacher compensation problem. One of my favorites is a New York-based organization called Math for America. What they do is they recruit promising math and science educators, and they pay them extra money for just going to school and teaching and being fabulous. And that's their whole mission, is to provide professional development experiences, a community of like-minded colleagues, and to augment their salaries so that they stay in the classroom. And there are a lot of fabulous philanthropists in this country as well who could put their dollars behind education. And with a fairly simple model like that, they could make a big impact on the teachers who are in front of kids in their classrooms.
Now, Constance, could you talk to us about, the pandemic and how that's affected educators as well? And I mean, I think your app helps educators, obviously with what's transpired in a year and a half, and and a lot of teachers are getting ridiculed for not wanting to go back to schools to teach in certain states. But I'm like, why should they want to go back? Why?
Yeah. So the pandemic has been, in a lot of ways, a catalyst for reimagining how we do grading, reporting, assessment in general. And if your whole concept of grading, reporting, and assessment has been flipped on its head, that has effects on what you do in the classroom. So, for example, if you if you have your students working remotely and you assign a traditional unit test or essay, there's no way for you to know if the student does that and submits it on their own with the help of a private tutor, if their mom does it, if their sister does it. So the whole concept of knowing what your students know becomes a very tricky puzzle. And so part of what we help schools do is identify what are some instructional strategies that help you really dig into assessing what your kids know, not just kind of tracking assignment completion, regardless of who did it, and kind of keeping track of points. So that's been a real eye-opener. You see a lot of colleges dropping the SAT and the ACT right now because they just can't control for how it's been administered during a pandemic. And so parents used to put a lot of pressure on their kids to study for those tests, a lot of times spending thousands of dollars on private tutors if they can afford it. But that's becoming irrelevant as well. So it's kind of like the formulas for how we assess students are changing, which I think is really exciting because I think it can only get better. And so that's the space that we're in, and there are a lot of driving forces that are making the work we do at Mastery Portfolio really exciting for that reason.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad that you care enough to keep up the fight. I really do. Now, what do you feel? What are your thoughts on the new Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona? And I'm gonna give you, three of his three of his platforms, the themes that he ran on. That he ran on, but the things that he believes in. Okay, so he believes in supporting worker rights, right, for teachers, prioritize public schools, right, and hold charter schools accountable, rely less on high-stakes standardized tests, right? Those are a couple of the things that he believes in. But my thing is, first of all, why did we stop relying on private schools? Because, I'm not in this field. I want to know what you think about his platform.
Why did we stop relying on public schools? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Well, I want to know why you. First, I want to know why we stopped relying on public schools, Constance, and then after that, I want to know what you think about his platform, which is supporting, teachers, workers' rights, prioritize public school, which is one of the questions already, and relying less on high stakes standardized tests. What's your thoughts on those things?
Yeah. So these, you can write a whole book on all three of these things, but.
Could you give us a little mini one here?
Yeah, here's the nut.
Could you give us the how do you say the prologue, please?
Right. So I think part of what we're observing with public schools right now is that education is a localized type of an organization. There is not a ton, except for these high stake tests, which are federally mandated and kind of state implemented. Most decisions happen at the local school board or local Department of Ed level. Schools themselves, if you look at New York City is, and many cities in our country are extremely segregated in terms of social, economic, racial, other demographic makeup. So it happens to be that the families that have their student at the public school on the Upper East Side have a whole strong parent-teacher association and funding that's coming in through donations. And it's just not a one-to-one comparison between a certain community school and another community school because of the resources that may or may not be in a given neighborhood. So I think that has caused like kind of a fissure in our trust in the public school system, I think. Feel free to disagree, but there's not sort of a guaranteed level of experience that a student is going to have, basic level of experience. So that kind of led to the federal mandate for state testing back in, I think 2008 may have been the first year, we had No Child Left Behind in the state testing. If I'm remembering correctly, it was my first year teaching. And the state tests, the rollout of them and the implementation varied state to state, and some was successful and some was not. But the philosophy of holding all students to a certain level of like, this is the standard, this is what on grade level looks like. Teachers, here's what you're tasked to teach, go teach it. I am okay with that concept of having the same standards for all students, because I think any students can reach high expectations. And before that, it was kind of up to the teacher of what they wanted to teach or not. And sometimes students would end up going to the next grade level unprepared because there was a certain unit the teacher didn't want to teach, for example. So I think a certain level of standardization is good, but within that, there needs to be freedom for the teacher to pursue that content as they see fit. So the problem with the state tests often is that students take the state test, but by the time they're graded and the scores come back and the data comes back, that student has already passed on to the next year. And so the teacher who knew that kid and was teaching that content can't actually then intervene now that they have this good mastery data of what the student got right and what the student missed. So that's part of the implementation challenge, that schools need to rely less on state tests because there's really nothing there's nothing actionable they can do with that data by the time it comes back. So that's why it's helpful to have another source of data tracking, such as our app, the Mastery Book, where
Mastery Portfolio, the Mastery Book, available in your Apple iTunes now.
Right. But sales pitch aside, like you can actually give your students a practice state test, and you can grade yourself, and you can keep all the mastery data right there, and then you can pull small groups based on who's successful at a given skill and who's not, and so you can get ahead of it. So when that state test rolls around, not only are you confident that your kids know everything that's going to be on it, but your students are confident too, because they've seen their mastery grow over the course of a year. And so that's the way you really start to move the needle and increase student achievement, is by tracking that mastery from the beginning, not relying so much on those state tests.
I love it. I love that you focus on the weaknesses and not on the strengths. I feel like, we spend too much time giving people gold stars, and it's like, no. We got to focus on what you're not doing well. Even if you're a 90% student, you're not a 100% student. So what's that 10% about? And you're able to, and it's not even like in a way that's like, how do you say, emotionally hurting the child. It's in a very, really discreet manner. It's like you go on the app, like, look, your child had an issue with this situation. I think he needs to work on this. I think it's absolutely beautiful what you guys are doing, and you're doing it in a way that is that is relevant, because we do live in a digital age, and a lot of people are continuing to forget that. And I really appreciate what you folks are doing. Now, could you tell us, what the difference is between working at because, you hear this buzzword, charter school. What's the difference between a charter school and a public school? Could you let the people know from a teacher's experience?
Yeah, sure. So I've taught at charter schools and district public schools in New York City. So I can speak to that. I also I support charter schools here in Ohio. I'm based in Ohio now with Mastery Portfolio. So can speak to that experience as well. The concept with a charter school is that, once the charter is granted, they get a certain number of dollar amount per student to operate. And then they have a lot of autonomy to do whatever they see fit with those funds. Whereas in a traditional district school, there's a certain amount in the budget that you have to spend on textbooks, a certain amount on professional development, a certain amount on, teacher, coach, paying your coaches, like things like that. Everything is very structured, and there's not a lot of wiggle room to be innovative in the way budgets, for a traditional district school are, at least in New York City. Now, that's a gross kind of simplified generalization. If you talk to a principal, they can tell you a lot more about how the budgets work, but that's kind of the concept. So for charter schools, you feed them, you feed them, and then you weed them. So the other part of charter schools is that there is supposed to be a high level of accountability where if student achievement is not happening, that charter operation gets shut down because it's no better than, the district community school that may have been there before. So that's the idea, is that they're adding, with that flexibility, they're able to be more innovative to provide a better program for students. That's kind of the promise of a charter school.
Yeah, which I don't see personally. I'm sorry, I don't see it in a lot of charter schools,
well,
especially in my niece's school. I'm disappointed, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Well, education is a human endeavor, so it's prone to flaws, right? We all have flaws. But I will say that there are a lot of different models for running charter schools. Some are more successful than others. In New York City, you have a lot of large charter networks that have a central office with additional resources and have funders and donors, and they kind of provide resources to all of their schools within the network. So that can work well. You also have smaller kind of mom and pop charter schools, as I call them, that just operate on their own, but sometimes have the support of other partner organizations like Teach for America or Mastery America or some of these other ones. Out here in so in New York City, teachers generally do get paid a bit more at charter schools than at the district school for the same amount of experience, at least starting salary. And so that's to kind of entice them. You lose your rights within the union when you go to a charter school generally, unless the charter school is unionized. But the compensation is supposed to be better. So whereas out here in Columbus, Ohio, in some of the charter schools I've worked with, the compensation isn't better. And so it's really hard for charter principals that I work with to find good talent sometimes, because a good teacher can get a better paying job with better benefits at a public district school. Now, granted, out here, we have a lot of high performing suburban districts. And so the kind of achievement gap is sort of concentrated in kind of the downtown Columbus proper schools, which again is, a neighborhood-based issue. And we have school vouchers, which is a whole other issue, where families can take their seat dollars for their student and send their kid to a private school and take that money kind of out of the public district, which, people feel different ways about. But again, this is why school decisions are localized, and it varies so much, district to district and state to state. But I think, identifying teacher compensation as an issue and a driver is right. And student achievement has to be measurable so that we can make sure that we're serving kids, right? It's if we're not all held accountable at every level of the scheme, then we're not serving kids at the end of the day.
Download Mastery Portfolio in the app. It's in the App Store now, because that's what you guys are trying to. I mean, I love it. I love what you folks are doing. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, though, Constance. Like, what about the LGBTQ situation? Like, how do you handle that as a teacher? Because that's a changing landscape right now, and it's like not only, and this is why teachers need to get paid more. God, I don't understand it. Yeah. I don't know how I get paid more than a teacher. To me, it makes no sense at all. To me, that's a disgrace. You have to not only balance education, right? You have to balance the social norms and everything happening in the world and try to because you're the first line of defense. You're cultivating all these ideas that they want to implement in political policies. You have to deal with that as a teacher.
Yeah. I try to put myself in my students' shoes whenever possible. And I've had students who are figuring out their identity and going through some really tough stuff. And home all of a sudden is not a safe space where they can be themselves. And if they have a teacher at school who creates a safe space for them and their classmates in that classroom respect them and show it, that makes a huge difference in their self-worth, their confidence, their experience, their mental health. Yeah. So, I think this isn't a new issue. We just are more aware of it now. There's more research around it. People are willing to kind of speak up and share their experience. Whereas before, I think people felt compelled for a lot of social pressure reasons to stay kind of hidden in their identity. And so teachers become the front line. They act as social workers. They act as confidants. Yes, they act as teachers and disciplinarians when needed, but they also act as friends. And educating a child means educating the whole child. You can't ignore a part of who they are because you're trying to develop their, science brain. You really have when kids experience anxiety or trauma or pressure, their brain kind of goes into, I call it like their reptile brain, where they can't actually perform higher level cognitive functions because they're in this sort of flight or fight response. And so we have to make sure students feel comfortable in our classrooms in order for them to really be able to thrive and learn and like form new neural connections and participate in the whole learning process.
I mean, it's so true. And, and thank you for that information, because, people need to know what's going through the mind of an educator, and we really appreciate that here at the Angel of Words podcast. And, now it's time to play 5 Words with Angel. Now, Constance, on 5 Words with Angel, I'm going to ask you a word or a phrase. You're going to give me the first word, phrase, or thought that comes to your head. If you break out into a dissertation, it's totally fine. Don't worry about it.
So 1 word per prompt?
Well, yeah, 1 word. It's 5 Words with Angel, 1 word. You're going to give me a word of the first word or phrase that comes to your head, but then sometimes people want to go off on a tangent because the word sparks something in them. So, I'm not here to judge. Just, we'll go with the flow. The first phrase is remote learning. What do you think about when you think about remote learning?
You're on mute, or turn your video on, right? I mean, these phrases that we just have been on repeat all year.
Oh my God. I don't know how that, oh my God. We're going to talk about that after 5 Words with Angel, because I have to visit that. That must be so crazy. All right, the second phrase is, who's your favorite teacher ever, Ms. Borro?
I think of my colleagues who were always the favorites because they connected so well with kids. I'll just go ahead and shout her out. Masua Stevens from the Young Women's Leadership School of Brooklyn was everyone's favorite teacher, and she's fabulous.
Nice. I love it. Shout out to her. What's her name again? Give us just in case people didn't hear clearly.
Masua Stevens, born and raised in Brooklyn, educating Brooklyn girls, an all-girls school, doing a fabulous job.
Oh, awesome. Shout out to her. The third phrase is the American educational system. What do you think about when you think about the American educational system?
Ready for change, I suppose.
Nice, I like that. It should be if it's not already undergoing these changes. Now the fourth word is what was your favorite subject in school, Constance?
I was an architecture major, so I really enjoyed studying that. I thought it was a good confluence of lots of things. It's not really a traditional subject. I suppose math was my favorite subject, and I was a math teacher for 13 years, so there you have it. I never thought I'd be a math teacher. I thought I'd be an English teacher, but I did really enjoy math in school.
So math and architecture is your things. Nice. And the fifth and final word, it's a little bit of a curveball, but not really. What do you think about when you think about Mastery Portfolio.com?
Honest. I think promise and I think the future. It's so exciting to build something from scratch and put something into the universe that didn't exist before, and know that it's going to help people, and know that it might be able to make me money and help me make a little more than a salary eventually down the line too.
You got to pay for the copies that you got to give the kids. You know what I'm saying? This is like crazy. I used to feel so bad. I'm like, why is the teacher coming out of pocket as a child? I don't know. I've always had like a business mom. I'm like, why is my teacher paying for copies? Shouldn't the school be paying for that? Like, that is a disgrace. Like, God, man. Like, we got to invest in these are children.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. If you're going to take care of the students, you need to take care of the teachers.
That's a fact, man. Like, I don't understand. I feel like sometimes the simplest things in America become the hardest things in the universe. Like, it's just ridiculous. They're taking care of your kids and they're teaching them the realities of life. You know, and they're nurturing them as well. Like, to me, it's like, I don't know, man. I feel like we need to put some respect on teachers' names. That's basically my thought process when it comes to that. Well, I mean, Ms. Borro, could you let us know where to find Mastery Portfolio before we end the podcast? Tell us about the app. Tell us about anything educationally that we need to be aware of, and a message out there to your students who are watching.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us on masteryportfolio.com. And if you hover, or scroll through the page for a second, a window will pop up where you can sign up for our newsletter. That's a great way to hear about what we're up to and just keep up to speed. We recently hired a really exciting chief operating officer, Star Sackstein. She's written 10 books on what we do. And we've used a lot of her philosophies and her work in building this company. So to have her on the team is huge. And we're just really excited to be able to serve more schools and do more good work. And I encourage anyone to reach out to me at Constance@masteryportfolio.com if you know of a school that might benefit from rethinking their grading and reporting scheme, and working with us to kind of build a pathway forward.
Awesome. And a message to your students, let them know how much you care.
For any students who are watching, I learned more from you guys than I ever could have from anyone else in my entire career. So thank you for that. And email me also, Constance@masteryportfolio.com. I want to hear what you're up to in life these days.
Perfect. Everyone, that was Constance Borro. Folks, let's get our teachers paid. Let's stop, breaking their balls so much. They're doing a service that is important in life, because in life, you have bosses. You have people that are not going to be nice to you. There's evil people out there, and these teachers are doing their best not only to educate your children, but to give them those life lessons. Yes, there's always bad apples, like there's bad apples in the police department or anywhere else in corporate America, in the NBA, in the NFL. Let's put some respect on the teachers' names. Also, please share on YouTube and all the podcast platforms. You know that you could also check out our exclusive content at www.aowent.com. Donations go to Cash App AOWNYC. And if you want to know what I'm up to, I'm on my social media platforms. It is at Angel of Words ENT. Thank you for tuning in, everyone, and we'll talk to you later.